Hey guys, James with Brew Performance. Today we'll talk a little bit about the OEM carrier bearing for the KRX 1000 machines and all of its problems and what we've done to fix the issues. Basically, what it is this little tiny ass skateboard bearing per se is what will hold on to the stub shaft coming out of your transmission, and this is where your yokes for the drive shaft go up to the front differential. And what it does is this tiny little bearing, it's thin, it's small, and it's open, meaning there's no grease inside of here. Kawasaki tried to give us a couple of seals on the OEM housing that didn't work very well at all, just for the sole fact that this bearing is wearing out. When that bearing wears out, you get all this slop and all this play, and it seals doesn't do its job. You get dirt, water, nasty up inside of the housing, and it just destroys this bearing very, very quickly. I mean, as you can see, this is the old bearing that we pulled out of somebody's machine, and that sounds like pure hell. So what we've done to fix the issue is we've made a new billet housing with a sealed bearing that is significantly larger in size. I mean, you can see that right there. It's larger in diameter, and then it's, I don't know, about twice as thick or so. When you do that, gives this whole support piece a hell of a lot more support inside of this housing, so it's going to be less likely to wear out and fail. What we've seen too is once this gets all sloppy, loosey-goosey, nasty, you'll get vibrations, and then this will no longer be in line with the output shaft or the output little sub guy from the transmission. So this will bolt on the end of your transmission. This stays put. So when this wiggles like this, you're putting a lot of tension and stress onto this shaft. And we've seen that right here or right here, with it being out of alignment, this shaft is a lot more likely to break because it has no support and it's just wobbling the hell around. So with our carrier bearing inside of here, we give you that big old bearing, and then an added benefit is we give you two seals on this side and we give you a seal on the outside, and that will seal onto the shaft area right here. So once you plug this feller in, you can see it's tight, it ain't going nowhere. And internally, now you've got a greased and sealed bearing. Now you have an extra layer of protection with two seals on the outside. So this will fix all of your vibration issues. This will fix your alignment issues. I mean, you can see it. Hear it. It's nice and smooth and quiet, the way it should be, without any wiggle up inside of here. So that's what we're doing with it. This particular one right here, I've modified this housing. This is one of our original ones. This probably got 1,000 miles or so on it. Before we had the billet housings made, I modified an OEM housing to fit our big bearing inside of here. This particular one, I wanted to see how it would act with some extra grease inside of here. So you can see this grease inside of here, this is wiped out a little bit just for clarity, but this grease is still perfect condition. This bearing inside of here is still clean, it's still pretty, it's lubricated. On this side here, you can see the same deal. I mean, yeah, the grease is a little bit dirty, but the bearing inside of here is clean. The C-clip is clean. The bore of the bearing is clean. We feel this is the best way to go about fixing this whole issue. If your shaft has a lot of bit of damage, or say if your bearing has exploded, we would recommend changing this whole shaft, just because this is a slip fit from Kawasaki, meaning this bearing right here is not a press-on deal. So this just slides in and it will rotate. Well, what happens is when these bearings go bad, it will gouge up the inside of this race a little bit, and you'll have an undersized deal. So even if you have a new bearing going on here, it still has the potential to wiggle just a little bit. We haven't seen that often. Again, that's if bearings have exploded, you have damage to this area of the shaft, you want to go ahead and replace it. Another question that we get a lot is, okay, I've got my bearing carrier assembly out. How the hell do I get this thing off? I beat on it. I can't get it out. Under here, under this seal on the front side, there is a C-clip on the shaft that holds this whole assembly to the shaft. You can see it. That's this bearing, this race right here. That would be a C-clip that goes into here and holds your bearing on. So all you got to do is just pull out the front side of the seal right here. You'll see the C-clip right here. Remove that C-clip from the shaft, and this whole assembly will slide right out, just like I've done here. It'll just come right out, and you can plug ours right back into it, and you'll be good to go. We also get, does this go back with a new assembly? It does not. The new bearing right here is too wide for a C-clip to go back in, and that's not a bad thing, because when you put this in, this goes all the way in, bottoms out. Can't go this way anymore. The way this thing bolts onto the frame of the machine is the bolts come in from this way, so this can't go this way anymore, and then your stub shaft on the end of the transmission won't let this whole assembly go that way anymore. So this is pretty well bound. So this ain't gonna walk, it ain't gonna wiggle. What we do recommend though is putting a little bit of red Loctite or green Loctite on this little race right here, just so the inside of this bearing race kind of sticks to the shaft a little bit and helps prevent any kind of spinning of the bearing on the shaft, a little galling or anything like that. Not quite necessary, but that's what we do recommend. You'll be good to go on that. The other portion of what we offer as well is we do give you a new C-clip that will go into that location right there. Basically what that does is it's the yoke stop. So this C-clip, after you have assembled our carrier assembly into the shaft, this C-clip will go right here in this groove, and like I said, we do give you a new one because it's open and it'll get rusty and whatnot. So once you put that C-clip on there, what that does is the yokes right here has a little space to it, and then you've got your pinch bolt. Well, what can happen is, if you can see it, if you overgo it, you'll have to back up the yoke just a little bit for that bolt to go through. Basically, all this little C-clip does right here, it's the yoke stop. So you install this, the yoke will line up in its groove right about there, and it'll stop, and then you'll be good to go, and you can put your bolt through. So that's pretty much the gist of it. One other thing is, how the heck do I get this little stub shaft out to begin with? Basically, the short story of the procedure is, if you unbolt the front diff, there's 4 bolts underneath it. You don't need to take the axles out or the arms off or anything like that. You can slide that front diff forward, and that'll give you enough room to get this whole assembly out. There's 2 bolts holding on a bracket right here. You unbolt that, you kind of rotate this out of the way, and this portion of it right here, again, this is transmission, this stays put. These sets of splines right here, you'll go forward with this whole assembly, and you'll get this out, you'll get this down, and then you'll shoot this whole assembly back out of the ass end of the machine. These splines to get out of this little coupler right here are shorter than trying to get it out of the yoke assembly first. So like if you tried to get the yokes out of this way, you have to shove the diff forward a lot more than you would have to if you got this end out first. So you slide this end out, you get it up and over, and then you can squiggle out this whole assembly out of the yokes. Again, back on install, we're not reusing the one clip for the bearing. All you need to do is just put this 1 C-clip on after you installed everything, and put your yokes back on, shove everything in, put your diff back together. That's basically the gist of it. Like I said, we feel that using 2 extra seals on top of a sealed bearing with some grease inside of there, 3 layers of protection per se, is the best way we found to go about doing all of this. And that whole setup right here inside of your machine is going to last a heck of a lot longer than that tiny ass little skateboard bearing with no grease inside of it. So I hope this helps. I hope this answers a few questions. We'll see you on the next one.